Hey, all you cats and kittens, it's Ray. Yeah, I've been away, and I know I'm sorry. I have had some issues going on, a few things, a lot of work stuff, a lot of health stuff. I do have issues breathing right now. They have prescribed me a couple things, and we are trying to figure out what's going on. So I'm probably going to talk a little bit slower today than you would normally hear, and I'm going to try to keep things short and sweet. I know it's been a long time. I'm sorry I've been gone. I've done the best I can. Just things have not worked out. And a few other things have popped up now. I have recently bought a new house. We are moving, and we are going to try to get out of the funeral home by the beginning of December. So, like next weekend is going to be total moving day. And I'm not doing a lot of carrying, but I will be doing packing and then helping unpack. So along those lines, I'm trying to keep things up. I've got a few things ready to record and set to go, so I should be a little bit ahead. And I know this is Halloween, and this is my time of year. I just don't have it in me to do a Halloween show. I'm really trying really hard to be able to do this now. Just for an example, I was going to record yesterday, and then 3 deaths, and I worked the entire day. Like from beginning to end, and then I've been over today getting things ready for those families, and then tomorrow I'll be doing the same thing. Plus we have a few pending, so this could happen at any point, anytime I can be called away. So for me, this is the only time I'm going to get a chance to do this. My wife is away. She's at the new house doing stuff. I'm waiting to go back to work. I've got a short window. So without further ado, welcome everybody. My name is Ray. This is the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast, if I could get it out. And we are going to do some reviews of recent, new, and classic stuff. Mostly it's all semi-new. I've got a lot of books that I'm just so far behind on. So if I haven't reviewed a book, I'm sorry, I'm trying, and you're going to see it in the next book I do. So thank you for watching, and let's get right into it, shall we? Okay, so here's a book I've been meaning to review. I thought I'd done this, so I'll explain it all in a minute. But it's called Realm Walker, Blade and Shield, Book 1, a Monster Girl Harem fantasy adventure. So for you Harem people, you'll enjoy this book. It's by newcomer Eric Weir, or Wire, I'm not sure, and I can't remember, it's been so long since I listened. Narrated by Jane Tate, and has a book length of 10 hours and 58 minutes.
The shadowy landscape writhed and pulsated like a living being. A lone figure sat on a log, eyes lost to the hypnotic rhythm of the world around him. It ebbed and flowed against his senses, caressing his inner world like a warm body lying next to him on a cold winter night. Victor sighed as a crescent moon hung high in the black sky. There were no stars, only a celestial body casting its glow on the young man. Victor drank in the stunning beauty of the moonlight when a shadow slipped past a black tree. The young man's eyes lowered until he saw a form step from tree to tree until it stood at an opening, facing him. A black robe covered the figure, but aspects touched his senses. The figure had an hourglass form. A hood covered their head, but pale skin glowed against the darkness of the hood. A small smile bloomed as shadows covered the woman's eyes. The air took on an electric current as she sauntered closer.
Here's a book I really need to extend an apology for. I got this a while ago, and I thought I'd posted it, and then I saw it was in one of my folders for review, and I had to check that I hadn't done the review that I thought I had. So, Eric, I totally apologize. So first, let me say that if you are looking for some spicy erotica stuff, look no further. There are sex scenes aplenty, and they go from mild to spicy to holy shit, okay? The premise is sort of fun and weird. A dead goddess is looking to get resurrected and needs, I guess you would say, a lot of sex to return. And she picks a little champion, okay? I tried that line with my wife, by the way. Something needed resurrected and it needed a lot of sex to come back. And no dice. None at all. It's been a long time, folks. So anyway, with my breathing problems, I don't think I need it anyway. She, the dead goddess, not my wife, picks Victor Hobbs, aka the Blade, to be her champion, which means he has a whole lot of thrusting to do. Thrust. Along the way, he picks up a nice little harem and has nice little adventures between sharing all of his beef patties with all the girls. His all beef patty with all the girls. The story sort of bounces back and forth between different types of thrusting and grinding, because you have the grinding that you do to get yourself built up in power, and then, the thrusting with the blade, and then there's the thrusting and grind. Okay, you got it, okay? The thing is that I like, it's nice, is that the MC, he's not as powerful as, most MCs. He has moments where his girls, his gals, his ladies have to pull his butt out of the fire. So that's something I appreciate when the MC's not all powerful and all strong. It's the way it works. It's the way it happens. Because that way it shows you that they have foibles and that they have faults and they can improve, so if they can't lose, then, it's not quite as exciting. And I'm going to be the first one to say, I recently just wrote a book where my MC is really not that way. He is just not designed that way, but I did that intentionally and on purpose. But anyway, this is one of the things I enjoy, even though I wrote something completely opposite of that. Just a couple of things to note. And the first is a comment that my wife made to me. Vic refers to himself as the Blade a lot. My wife noticed that this really should be kind of a drinking game kind of thing. Now, I didn't think it was too that much, but as somebody who's only heard things sporadically, such as my wife, it must have really stood out. Like every time he says, refers to himself as the Blade, you take a shot. And after she said that, I kept listening, and I was like, wow, he does really refer to himself in that capacity quite a bit. So, it's just funny that I didn't realize it, but my wife, who's sitting here listening to it as we're sitting together in bed and she's doing her stuff on her iPad and I'm listening to my book, and she makes that comment, and I realize, sometimes I don't pick up on certain things, and that was one of those things I didn't get, but her, as an impartial listener, was like, did he just say that like for the fifth time? And I was like, say what? And so he went to that. So that's one of the things. It could bother you a little bit. Secondly, a lot of the secondary characters, and hence the secondary thing, even those in the harem don't feel as fleshed out, no pun intended, because, fleshed out is for harems, as they could have been. Really, there's like one woman in the harem, and the main character, the Blade, Victor, who are pretty well defined and all that, but everybody else, they're kind of like just superficially touched upon, which is fine. They're secondary characters, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more depth with that. Otherwise, it's not bad. I enjoyed the story. The narration by Jane Tate didn't take my breath away, but she can certainly read a sex scene with flair. No doubt about it. She did The Lewd Kingdoms by Eden Red. So if you've read those books and you liked her or you listened to those books, there you go. If you like The Lewd Kingdoms audio, this is perfect for you. If you liked her there, you'll love her here. I think I need to listen to her a few more times before I really get a feel for her. Sometimes that happens where I'll say, okay, the style doesn't sound bad. It just doesn't leap out at me. And it takes me a little bit to get my gears lined up so they're not kind of clinking or grinding. They kind of go, okay, I like this a lot. My final score, it's a decent book that has a lot of sizzle and hardly any fizzle. But like I say, it did have that repetitive nature to the Blade references, and the other characters weren't quite as developed as I liked, but otherwise it's a 7.8 stars, and for a first book from a guy into the genre, I think he did a pretty good job, so thanks, Eric. Okay, so next up is Grim Beginnings, The Ashen Plain, by Maxwell Farmer, narrated by Armin Taylor, with a book length of 9 hours and 10 minutes.
They were outnumbered. Both of them were injured and did not have much in the way of healing magic. The opposing team was in a much better situation, with their Minotaur captain serving as the team tank, taking and giving most of the damage, while the two life magic mages could only cast buffs and heals, maintaining a protective shield continuously. John knew time was limited. He could see cracks starting to form on Abraham's shield. They needed to eliminate the number advantage of the opposing team. He could try summoning a death creature. Unfortunately, one of the opposing team's two mages, being masters in life magic, would kill it off quickly. "Give it up!" the Minotaur said, while repeatedly swinging his sword. The brute wasn't running out of stamina because he was constantly being replenished by one of his mage teammates.
All right, so I'm going to start off by talking about Armin Taylor himself. The man is a narrating beast, and he does some of my favorite voices, like Arat from Chris Carney's Realm series. He's just killer. And of course, I have to say I love his Cutter from James Hunter's VGO stuff. Cutter reminds me so much of, like, Mick Jagger doing something, and Mick Jagger always wanted to be an actor. I think he wanted to be an actor more than he wanted to be a singer, to tell you the truth. If you see his life, he's always kind of going for trying to get those acting roles, and it never fleshed out, because if you've ever seen Free Jack, you would know why he's not a mainstream actor. The same with Sting and Dune. They should just stick to what they're good at. And in either way, Armin Taylor channels an Oscar caliber, I should say, Mick Jagger, okay? So he always seems to elevate. He can take, the silliest voice and make it seem great, whatever he's working on. And he does that here. So Grim Beginnings, ironically, has a bit of a rough start, and it's just something that you kind of have to push through. It's one of those things where, they say, you got the layers of whatever it is, and you got to get through the top layer before you can get to the really good stuff down below. It's kind of like that. It's not horrible by any stretch, but it's more somehow wonky by, I don't know. The book just, it improves as it goes on. I'll put it like that. And I have to say that it was an easier pill for me to swallow since Taylor narrated it, and that's what he does. He takes stories and he makes them better. And Armin Taylor really did elevate this story to a different place. And again, I can't speak for the written word because I haven't read a book in a long time. I've listened to books for years, so I don't know if I was reading this, if I would have thought it was kind of slower or off base a little bit. But it just kind of felt, I don't know, maybe forced or it just kind of like pushed in the direction it didn't want to go, is the way the story felt to me. But Farmer's work isn't bad by any stretch, and it clearly improves as it goes along. One thing I liked is how the MC is played like an average person. And by that, I mean he isn't all-knowing or all-powerful, and he really kind of does stuff that I would do if I were in his place. In other words, he does stupid things because, if I had certain abilities, I would forget, oh man, what I forgot as I was following, I could shoot a web out of my fingers, or I can cast fireball, and or I would forget those stupid things and go much harder routes 90% of the time. And I'll give you an example in real life. If I have to go somewhere and I've driven one particular route a dozen times because I had to learn that way and that's how I learned to go, I will never deviate from that route, even if somebody comes up and goes, if you took this road here, it would take you right to it. It'll take you right to that place within 20 minutes earlier. It'd shave 20 minutes off your time. And I would say, that's great, but I really don't want to risk it because I don't want to get lost, and I don't want to change my route. I'm very comfortable with it. So I'm going to take the extra time and enjoy like maybe 20 minutes more of listening to a book. And that drives my boss crazy because he'll say, if you took 16, it would have got you there faster. I don't know that route, and I'm not chancing it because if I take it, I'm going to go crazy, go somewhere else and get lost. And that's how the MC kind of plays out to me. Is he does things comfortably, things he's worked into, he's okay with. So you can say, well, he didn't use the magic, or he didn't do this or that. And I think it's because if you just tumbled into a new world, 90% of us who found themselves with certain abilities are going to be like, oh, hey, look, I have 5 powers. I can fly, I can shoot fire, I can turn invisible, and whatever else you got, okay? 90% of you guys are going to be like, fly, 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 fly. And then like 2% of those people are going to fly, turn invisible while they do it, and shoot fireballs down on people, and, whatever the other things. They're going to do all those things and they're going to master it. But, like, most of us are going to just be like, oh, man, I'm going to just shoot fireballs, or I'm going to fly, or I'm going to, like, just be invisible. And the other things are going to kind of be secondary powers, and you don't think about it, as often as you should. And I think that's really, I think that's the case. I really just think that you get used to doing something, or you kind of glom on to one particular kind of skill. It fits you or makes you feel better or whatever. And so when you say to me, because I know this would be an argument, he didn't do this or he didn't do that, I think it's just because that's how people are. And so to me, that was realistic. And I would kind of strong arm my way through stuff, even if I didn't have to use lift it up with my hands. I would literally lift with my hands rather than use a jack, or a forklift or something. I would do it that way. Now the book isn't revelatory or bringing anything out of the blue, some new concept into the genre, but that's okay. Not every book has to be completely different and stand out with a great concept. Sometimes you can have a solid, I'm just a simple LitRPG novel. And that's what this is. And I think, honestly, that book 2, and I haven't read it or listened to it or anything like that yet, but I know it's coming out soon, or it's come out, will probably be an improvement, because you don't have that beginning part you kind of got to fight through to get to the good stuff. You've already bypassed all that, and I think book 2 will kind of just slip in, and it will be an easier ride. It's kind of like your first ride down the hill on the hill after it snows. Your first sled ride down. That first sled ride, you got to get the groove going. The second one or the third one, you're just going so fast because it's well worn down. You're just shooting down that hill. It's the same thing. I think he's worked through the hard parts. Now it's nothing but the fun, and I can see that happening. So like I say, it is fun after the initial startup. It paces itself well. Worth a look. It's worth a book too. I just think that it had a little bit of an issue at the beginning that kind of took away. After that, it was good, but it's a 7.6 for me, just because it was a little bit harder to get through the beginning, and Armin Taylor did help that part a lot. I think that had he not been there and had been somebody different, it wouldn't have been quite as fun or as enjoyable. Okay, so the next book I'm doing is The Dungeon Fairy, a Dungeon Court Escapade, or Escapade, as they would say in France. The Hapless Dungeon Fairy series, by the amazing Jonathan Brooks, narrated by Miles Miley, with a book length of 9 hours and 24 minutes.
The Dungeon Corps couldn't communicate with her until they bonded, of course, but she detected a strong sense of suspicion, she thought. It was better than the overwhelming fear and panic from Jeremy, at least, but it was still uncomfortable. As soon as her fairy mana regenerated enough, which didn't take long, since she deactivated her invisibility and repellent shield as soon as she saw that it was obviously safe, she flew over to the core. The suspicious feeling never really went away, and only increased the closer she came, spiking to insane heights as she placed her hand on the warm crystalline form. "What are you doing here? Are you here to steal my stuff? I told the last one that I was done with all of this and just want to be left alone with all my precious treasure. You can't have it." The female voice of the core violently shouted at her as soon as the bond was established. "Whoa, I'm not here to take any of your rewards."
For me, there's no doubt this is probably the best book that Brooks has done so far. Thus far, it is just awesome because he takes a lot of things and flips them on his head. And I'm going to separate that specifically from his Bio Dungeon book that he did with Jeffrey Falcon-Logue, simply because that is a collaboration, and so, I'm going to keep it separate. But as a standalone, as much as I liked, Fred Winklemossering and the Station Core thing that he had going on, and even the horror core or core of horror, I as much as I didn't dig the narration, I think the story was really good. But this right here, to me, it was like, okay, the other books were standard dungeon stories, okay, whether it was a sci-fi dungeon or this or that. They were dungeon stories that had certain things going on. This one kind of flips it. And that's what I like about it a lot, is that it kind of takes the concept and says, here's something new. So to me, this is probably his best book. I've really enjoyed this. And I mean that it's original and fun, and Brooks at his absolute rightiest best. The story, without giving away too much, even though today is technically Halloween that I'm recording on, so I'll be giving away candy later on, is about a dungeon helper who ends up running a dungeon on her own. Now, the dungeon fairy is quite likable, and her struggle to convert from being a helper to actually operating a dungeon on her own, and I don't want to tell you how that happens, is quirky, okay? And it's a good little struggle, because, you know, what if you were like the assistant to the president, and then the next thing you knew, you were the president? Ta-da! Or what if you were like the guy that, here's a good one. If you just came into class to learn from Pablo Picasso how to paint, and then he vanished, and you were the only guy that could paint, how well would you do? Because, you know, you were the guy that helps him, you know, do stuff. You're handing him paints and stuff like that, and then suddenly he's gone, and you've got to do all the painting. Not quite so fun then. It would be a little stressful. So you've got I used to do this, and now I'm doing that, and there's a lot of balancing that has to go on. So the fairy starts off under the auspices of having been born under some sort of unlucky curse or unlucky whatever it was, and then she proceeds to prove all the other people's beliefs that she's unlucky correct by inadvertently playing Dr. Kevorkian to a number of dungeons before getting a dungeon of her own finally that survives, which is really her. Because she tries a lot of things to help a lot of dungeons, and none of them seem to make it more than a couple days with her. And it's not her fault. So, and again, I'm not trying to give away too much of the story, but that just kind of sets it up. She's very unlucky. Everybody knows that she's unlucky. They pick on her. They don't cut her a break. I mean, like, from the minute she shows up, bad things happen. And one of the things that I really enjoy about this is that this is kind of told from the dungeon's perspective, so that you don't have, like, the adventurers or the guild known as, like, the adventurers or the guilds. The dungeons see the adventurers as raiders. They are antagonistic to a greater extent than what they would be if they were just considered adventurers, you know, because, like, for example, in the Divine Dungeon, the dungeon knows that the Delvers are going to help it improve itself because they're in the dungeon and they're doing things and so on and so forth. So it's a symbiotic thing. And regardless of what happens here, the dungeons don't see the adventurers that way. They are seen as raiders. They come in, they take stuff, they break things, they kill things, and then they move along. And they're even dangerous to the cores themselves. So that perspective alone tells you a lot about what that world is like, and it gives you a feel for what this poor little fairy has to go through. I mean, the fairy's tossed in over her head and completely left on her own. And she suddenly finds herself that her powers as a helper, no, I don't want to give away too much away, but they don't go away. They don't vanish as she takes over the dungeon. And there are struggles that occur because now she has to figure out how to balance, like, gaining experience, because she has the helper powers, but she also has the dungeon powers, and they kind of conflict with how she's going to gain experience. So she has to do a lot of crazy off-the-wall things when she gets a helper in, and she can't tell anybody what's happening, because if she tells them, it could be like the end for her. Because if you think about, like, with Brooks, and this is another thing, it's kind of his little thumbprint coming back from the Dungeon World series, is that the dungeons aren't afraid to kill other dungeons if they don't live up to the dungeon's expectations. Like, the overall, this is what you're supposed to do as a dungeon, or this is how it's supposed to work. If you're not working it, you're hurting it, and they don't like that. So, you know, she can't reveal who she is or how she's doing what she does. So she's kind of got to keep things secret and explain to her new helper what the heck she's doing and why she's doing these things plausibly. And it's not easy. So, the struggles are real, and, that's the fun of it, where she does the juggling and the craziness and how she has to, am I this cursed person kind of thing. It's good. Miles Miley does his consistent best, which is always amazing narration. And it's not often that I will say that a man can portray the female lead very well, but Miles knocks this out of the park. Miles is absolutely one of my favorite narrators, and this is why. I mean, he just tells a really good story, bar none. So, I'm trying to keep this short. I could talk all day about this book, how much I loved it, and how much I cannot wait to get the next book. The book is original, it's well-paced, it keeps your attention, and is a great new concept for the dungeon genre. I really, really did enjoy this a great, great deal. 8.3 stars. I think that it just needed a little bit more action to it. There was a lot of struggle, strife, and thing, but there was a little bit of a missing bit of action, or it would have been a higher score for me. I would have liked to have seen, maybe dealing with more raids, raiders, that sort of thing. Even from other dungeons, something that would have kind of made the peril that the dungeon fairy was in escalate a little bit, because it would have just been off the charts if that had been in there. But I mean, again, I can't complain. The book is smart, it's funny, and it's greatly paced. So 8.3 stars. You'll like it, believe me. So that was our show. Thank you all for listening, everyone. I do appreciate you taking the time to watch or listen to the show. And if you want to support us, remember, you can like us on LitRPG Audiobook, LitRPG Podcast Facebook page, or the YouTube page, or just like and share the video. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed our show. Please leave comments and suggestions below. Tell me whatever you like. I really do enjoy listening to the feedback. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. And I recently saw that Ramon has started putting the podcast on Audible as well. So, and I didn't know anything about that. So it was kind of weird. I was just looking for audiobooks and saw that we're on Audible now. There's the Audiobook Podcast and the LitRPG Podcast. So you can find us on Audible too. Who knew? So that's that. I do have a new book out, everybody, and there'll be another one followed very shortly, I'm hoping. So if you want to check those out, you can find them on Amazon with my name, Raymond Johnson. So I appreciate if you could give those a look. I'm not even going to promote them here. That's just for you guys to, if you want to do it, do it. I don't want to push anything. But again, I would like to thank you all for listening. Take care, and remember, always leave a review if you can. So, if you've read a book, leave a review for the author. It means a great deal, and it helps them immensely. Thank you.